See Director Dice. Did I see Director Dice? I did not see Director Dice. It's that kind of morning. So if DGS wants to come on up, that'd be helpful. Good morning, Mr. Mia. I'll turn it over to you to walk us through the packet.
Excellent. Good morning, committee members. Good morning, staff. In front of you, we have the FY24 recommended budget for the Fleet Management Systems budget, or also known as the Motor Pool Internal Service Fund. Just for those who are watching at home, the Internal Service Fund, how they operate is essentially Fleet's budget, once appropriated, is charged back to individual departments, and so the costs are apportioned out by department. So what that means is essentially any additions to the fleet budget or reductions will propagate through the other budgets as chargebacks, and you'll see reductions or additions in those budgets. Each budget has not every, but most budgets have a motor pool adjustment line. That's where you'll see the charge to that department be reflected, and that charge is really based on a combination of factors, but mostly, I believe Gary can correct me, it's FTEs is the main, more FTEs you have, more charges you receive, essentially. You want to comment on that?
The motor pool charges are actually based on what we expect the charges to be for a combination of labor, parts, fuel, other motor pool services. So we look at what's been done in the past, and we try to estimate what the charges are going to be at each department for the coming year. Okay.
So for FY24, we have a number of increases. The main increases, I'll go through item number 1, and I'll turn back to vacancy in a little bit, but I'll go through the increases first. The main increases are in the vehicle service contracts. We have two main contracts. We have the light fleet contract, where we have an increase of $1.1 million for 24, and we have the heavy vehicle maintenance contract with an increase of $500,000. Last year, we added $260,000 for the light maintenance contract, the light fleet contract, and about $430,000 for the heavy contract. So this is a significant jump. Part of this increase is really being driven by increased maintenance needs. The light fleet, most of the light fleet, 75% of the light fleet is really public safety vehicles, and we have an aging fleet that's requiring more maintenance. The other part of this increase is really being driven by that we have not accurately budgeted. We've either under budgeted or over budgeted in some years. It's been difficult to budget for this contract. So essentially, the increase you're seeing this year is trying to catch up to what we think the true budget will be for next year. So for council staff's recommendation, recommending this add to the reconciliation list as high priority. I think the maintenance cost will need to be incurred in order to keep our fleet operational, especially public safety and transit buses. And so I'd ask the committee to add this list as a high priority item.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mia. I'll turn it over to DGS to kind of just elaborate a little bit more about what some of these items are. I appreciate the clarification that the light fleet is largely public safety, but if you can go a little deeper.
Jamie Cook, Chief Operating Officer, DGS. First, Director Dice sends his regards. He's at a ribbon cutting for a rec center that pulled him away. So, to my right is Calvin Jones. He's our Chief of Fleet Operations. He was the lucky one to take my old job, so that's why we both don't have hair. So to get into the administrative fleet, and there's a lot of different layers to this. You talk about supply chain. That's one of the key impacts right now. Getting new vehicles in has been a challenge. We go through, we're on a waiting list to put orders in. When we put the order in, then there's a delay or even a cancellation. There's also increases to the cost. And what that does, it rolls downhill to then the maintenance side, because as the age of the fleet rises, the costs go up as well. Included in that is parts. Parts have been a challenge on the supply chain as well, and the costs have risen pretty drastically.
A big picture question I have, because of our telework policies over the last number of years, how has that impacted our fleet?
Fuel consumption during the heavy telework days of the pandemic, we saw a big decrease in fuel consumption, and we saw, if you look at the work order count that's going down. When we did our projections for this FY, we had to go back, usually we go back so many set years. We had to go back additional years to get a true historical value of a projection of what it could be. So telework does impact it. We have, when vehicles deadline, we take the view of doing analysis to see if that vehicle's even needed. Because quite frankly, we can talk about EVs and things of that nature. The most sustainable product is reducing the fleet. So when we do have those deadline vehicles, meaning they should not be on the road anymore, the first question we ask is, do we need it?
How old are those vehicles generally when they're deemed insufficient for use?
I don't have the average year.
How you doing? Calvin Jones, Division of Fleet Management Services. So that's a tricky question, right? So typically when you look at our replacement cycle tends to look at, I think, public safeties at 6 years, administrative fleets at typically at about 7 or 8 years is what we usually look at. And then, like say, your heavier vehicles usually go out 10 and 12 years as a projected life cycle. The reality is that since 2008, we've been, in 2008 when the replacement fund was I guess it wasn't eliminated, but it was severely reduced because of the financial crisis at the time. We haven't gotten caught back up in the backlog. So you can look at the age of the fleet. So we're not replacing vehicles at that time, not yet. We haven't gotten back to that. Financially, we haven't been funded to do it, and so that's been the challenge. So when you look at the average age of fleet, it should be, like say, in different segments. Like say, if you looked at the public safety fleet, it should probably be about 3 years old. If you look at public safety right now, they're probably at about 6 or 7 average age of fleet. You look at the light duty fleet, we're upwards of 8 or 9 years of age, and the average age of fleet in the light duty administrative fleet. The heavy fleet, we depending on which segment you look at, whether you look at dump trucks or you look at, like say, other equipment. It's a little bit all over the place, but I just went through that to say that until the funding commitment's there, it's very difficult to get caught back up, and so the average age of fleet tends to the sweet spot would be at the sites at the ages that we use for the replacement cycle to minimize cost and those sorts of things. So.
I would just add, too, the older the vehicle, too, does impact sustainability. It's not just cost on parts and labor, because older vehicles spew out more emissions. So it's another factor, as even fossil fuel vehicles, as they've added more technology, they have gotten improved, but there's still an emission, unfortunately. But the older, the worse it is. So that's another reason why we want to get these vehicles off the road.
Sure. I just have one more question, and then I'll open it up to colleagues. So regarding the fuel costs, what is, if there is an increase from this year, from last year, what is the percentage of that increase? Right now it says fuel costs projected or a request of $2,300,000 approximately. Do we know what that cost was last year?
That's an increase of about 14%, just trying to use a round number. I believe last year the total budget for fuel in the county's fleet was around $16 million. That's being increased by about $2.3 million. And that's really trying to balance our projections for what fuel is going to cost with trying to keep budget capacity.
And how have we been this year, within this fiscal year, with regard to budget to actuals?
We are well over budget for fuel this year. Last year's projection was developed before the war in the Ukraine started, as one example of our supply chain troubles and troubles with fuel costs in general. So if you look at the quarterly analysis that we sent over in March, you're going to see fleets projecting higher OE, and a lot of that is driven by fuel costs.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Stewart.
Great, thank you for that. So I think, Mr. Jones, you mentioned this. Safety vehicles, police and other, are included in this as we're talking about it.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
Also, so one of the things, and I can't remember, actually, Deputy Director Cook, if you were there at the government operations meeting we had, but we talked about with Director Dice, Councilmember Katz and I did on looking at an equipment reserve fund moving forward, and I know, and this is the next item, the capital asset management system that you all are working on. I just wanted to bring that to the T&E committee because that is something government operations wants to work with all of you on so that we don't have these ups and downs as much in our budgeting, but that can set aside a fund dedicated to equipment replacement. Both Councilmember Katz and I did this in our cities wearing our prior mayor hats, and it helps smooth things out and keep things on a more regular schedule regarding replacements. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because it'll probably come back to transportation and environment as well. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next item. So thank you.
To clarify real quick, the Motor Pool and Service Internal Service Fund does have a replacement reserve fund for fleet replacements. As Mr. Jones mentioned, that has been historically underfunded going back several years. And OMB is currently working with DGS to determine a long-term multi-year fleet replacement plan and identify any funding needs that may be necessary to bring us up to speed with regard to our replacement backlog.
Yeah, but your memory serves you right. We were talking about facilities and fleet at the time, and facilities, we need that, and so that's, you were correct. Thank you.
Councilmember Balpin.
Yeah, that was my first question, was what's the plan to make sure that we get that back, that we're replacing vehicles when we need to. That was that one. Fuel. So I know it's been very difficult to plan. So for 2024, what numbers are you using for cost of fuel? Are you projecting that fuel costs will remain high?
So I believe that the current projections are that they will. I'm trying to get back to my notes on the.
While he's looking for that, fuel projections have been, and forecasts have been like the weather. It really has been challenging. And then every time we think we know what we know, something else comes up on the global scale, which we have no control over. I think we do the best we can with historical data, but what I've found is we're consistently wrong. And I don't know what the answer is, but when we talk to other people, they are consistently wrong. So that's a tough answer to give you. What I will tell you is we do look at any data sets we can find. We talk to other counties, we talk to other cities to try to see how they're going about it. And we're involved with some associations, but we're going to continue to try to improve that. But it's been harder as the year since I've been here 7 years. Every year it seems like it's harder and harder to answer that question.
And then, thank you. And then I have the question about the priority versus high priority for fuel. I would assume that fuel is non-discretionary.
That's right. My staff's recommendation to put as priority means essentially we would evaluate the cost of fuel next year as we get there and identify a supplemental if needed to fund that, to true up the budget. So this year, Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not expecting a supplemental for fuel for 23?
As you mentioned, because fleet is an internal service fund, the actual funding is appropriate in other departments' budgets. So we actually do have a supplemental, for example, for transit services. And a lot of their overspending this year is driven by the higher fuel costs.
So similarly, next year, if the fuel costs were to increase, we would expect a supplemental to come forward.
So leaving it as a priority, the understanding is that we will spend money on fuel as a non-discretionary cost, and we'll make it up in a supplementary if this is under budgeted.
Correct.
Okay.
We would at that point in time in the future, we'd have to identify a supplemental request, how we'd fund it, what savings would we achieve in the rest of the budget, and we'd work through that.
And if I could just jump in to add a little more clarity, given this conversation, this is very similar to the winter fund, the snow removal fund, which you can't necessarily predict, but we take it up after if it needs a course correction.
Okay, thanks. And then just a question about the EV chargers. Do we have a long-range plan for 10 years out, 20 years out? I mean, if the mass conversion happens as expected or desired, we're going to have significant infrastructure investment.
Yeah, yes, lots of thought. It's threefold. So charging at the county is decentralized. So DOT handles chargers in the parking lots. Calvin Fleet has funding more for, most of the time it's behind gates where the public can't get to, police, public safety, DOT at times, where he has funding that he can go in and put chargers. And then there's a community-based funding plan that's more holistic throughout the county, and it is for public use. So it is very well thought out. There was, this is more not fleet related, but more on our energy and sustainability team, where they've gone out and done studies where to put them, thinking of equity when they do that. But yes, there's a holistic plan. We don't necessarily control the infrastructure, but we have great relations with PEPCO and some of the other providers so that they know what's coming, that the grid won't be impacted.
Thank you.
Before we get to the recommendations, last question I have is regarding the light fleet and the acknowledgement that I think, as you said, most of it is public safety. Do you know what that breakdown is? And the reason I ask, I think it's important for the conversation, but I have received comments from people in the strangest of places who have commented to me that the county vehicles are nicer than their own. And so trying to understand what the rotation might be. You said it's 6 years, but what that mix is between public safety and other departments.
Okay, so the breakout is our administrative fleet, small fleets, 984 vehicles. Public safety, 1,710. That's police, and we do fire and rescue small, not their big equipment. 379 are transit, DOT. And then our medium to heavy fleet's 311, so that's roughly 34,000 vehicles, pretty big fleet. I think that statement would be directed at probably the EVs we're buying. And on the public safety side, we need to go after pursuit-ready vehicles. DOT has requirements, when there's bad weather, they're the ones out there in harm's way, and they need four-wheel drive. So the EVs that we originally got to pilot, and we piloted them before Ford, I might add, where it was the Ford E-Mach, or Mach-E. Pretty nice vehicle, and I'd be looking at it and saying that's nicer. The good news is Ford's coming out with mission, public safety mission-oriented vehicles. These are tested in Michigan for pursuit readiness and stuff like that. But we wanted to get out in front and pilot some of these vehicles in public safety, and specifically in DOT and DGS, quite frankly, to see how they would perform, to get ready for what was coming. And we have mandates, as you know, for 2035 that we got to get to. So we have to figure these things out now and see how they perform. The pilot with the police, we learned a lot, but could that unit specifically be used for public safety right now? No, not after all the upfitting and everything and the strain on the battery. The good news is the batteries are getting better. The new Mach-E itself is better. And then if you could talk to a little about what's coming as far as mission-ready vehicles, Calvin.
Okay. Mission-ready police pursuit-rated vehicles. The other one that's coming out is the Chevrolet Blazer. That will be electrified, and so they're passenger vehicle electrified this year, should be model year 23. Model year 24, it'll be pursuit rated. So that'll be an option for the police department as well. The one thing I wanted to add was that as you electrify, when you look at the automotive industry as a whole, electrifying the vehicle, when they electrify the vehicle, they have to get a target price point, right? So their target price point is going to be mid to high, because just the cost of batteries and things like that. So if you look at, that's part of the reason why they started in the luxury market and then worked their way down, just because it's a more favorable price point and they can meet it. So as our mission moves to electrification, so will the quality of vehicle, just because that's what the manufacturers build. The other piece, as far as options on those vehicles, you also have the Vision Zero program. And so the safety elements on those vehicles. The good thing about most battery electric vehicles, they come with a lot of it. But in order to ensure that drivers are safe, the public is safe from those vehicles, and our accidents are down, we try to target safety packages in those vehicles also to be able to kind of lean into that program as well. So,
And Mr. Cook, you delineated the different the vehicles for the different departments. What was that total number again?
It was 3,384 right now. If you ask me next week, it might be off because we buy and we access.
I understand the fluid nature of most of this, but 3,384 at this point in time for a workforce, it's about 10,000. That's basically one car for every 3 employees of the county. I agree with you that seems like it's a lot.
One thing to point out there is our collective bargaining agreement specifies that all public safety officers are assigned a vehicle.
Public safety is the exception to this entire conversation. I will footnote that. But I think there's work that we can do, especially given or in response to the question I asked at the beginning of this conversation about telework and recognizing how many individuals and departments have greater flexibility. With that greater flexibility, I think we need to ask ourselves whether they need some of these vehicles as well. And I'll put that out there for a future conversation.
I just had a question regarding electric vehicles. If you're also seeing any of the federal grants coming through or opportunities for cooperative purchasing, particularly for the EVs?
Yes, on both fronts. It's interesting though. The challenge with the grants is it also highlights another challenge for us with regard to bandwidth, right? So right now it's just so many grants coming down the pipeline. It becomes a bandwidth issue. It's how you how having the staffing and resources to be able to apply for all of those grants. But I agree, both federal and state. There's been a lot of incentives that come through, both for charging stations, battery energy storage, vehicles themselves, and so it's pulling resources from a lot of places in order to get it done. A lot of shared resources.
Yeah, the opportunity's there. DOT's sitting behind me. They do an incredible job with getting grants on the transit side with the no-low opportunities out there, and we've learned a lot from them. But it goes back to resources. And everyone's fighting over those resources now. So I know that department's lost some really good people because of the amount of grants. It's not just it's green energy period grants, hydrogen, solar, wind, chargers, you name it. But it's there, and we're going after it pretty aggressively to try to get these grants. And we're also working with some other departments to try to collaborate and try to go after these opportunities because they are there. And the other challenging thing is that a lot of the grants are in motion, so they're not exactly clear on how they impact us as far as direct pay. Do we get the money or does, so we're figuring, it's a moving part. But the timing is critical right now, so it's a great question.
Great. Mr. Mia, do you want to just walk us through your recommendations?
Yes, so I've covered the light fleet contract and the heavy contracts. On the fleet information systems replacement, there's a request for $391,000. This would replace the current system called Faster, which has been in operation for quite many years. With a new system, that would be essentially, it's from the same vendor as what DGS is doing on their facilities maintenance side. Of the $391,000, $307,000 is one-time cost for this year, for 24, and that's for setup, installation, implementation. The remaining $84,000 is for recurring subscription fees and ongoing maintenance and vendor support. Staff's recommendation is to add to the rec list as high priority.
Without objection?
Okay, increased, item number 3, increased cost of $172,500 for service fees for electrical vehicle chargers. This reflects essentially annual service and maintenance fee for the county's electric vehicle charging system. There's been a cost increase and an escalation based on increase in the total number of chargers. And so staff recommendation for that is also high priority. Add to the rec list.
And is this conducted through a vendor, or does DGS do this?
So we use a vendor. We're exploring other options to see if we can reduce these costs, but quite frankly, it goes back to finding tradespeople. This vendor's known to be able to do the O&M, which they handle the maintenance on these machines. Mm-hmm. We have concerns if we move to a new vendor, that might be an issue, but that's not stopping us from doing our due diligence, see if there's a better option out there.
And how many, I think Councilmember Balcom asked the question about future installation, but how many charging stations do we currently have or manage?
Currently, we have, in DGS fleet, we have about 30, approximately 30 chargers. give or take, approximately 60 charge points, because most of them are dual chargers. We do have 3 level 3 chargers to be able to support fast charging of vehicles and things of that nature.
So 30 chargers, most of them dual capacity?
Yes.
So based on this number, my back of the envelope math is nearly $5,700 to manage each one?
Yeah, it includes turnkey. It's a turnkey maintenance program. So it's turnkey maintenance as well as communications, because every one of them have, like, say, cellular communications. It's not networked into the building, so that they can communicate back to the charge point network, and then it also covers tech support. So. It's unfortunately the way, and so one of the reasons why Jamie was talking about, or Mr. Cook was talking about exploring other options, was the ChargePoint was one of the first networks out there, right? So, and back when the county started in 2014, it was the largest network, so it gave our employees the most options to charge. Now, as we fast forward now, that and so because of that, they have an exclusive network. They don't have partners that they send the work to other than local distributors that they create, and they've always approached it as an all-in-one package per unit. So they don't do group purchases, so they don't do a group service plan. And so for us, while it was good for us to start, moving forward as we expand, that's, moving to a different provider that's a little bit more flexible, gives us a lower O&M. And so that's what we're exploring.
Okay. $5,750 seems like a lot for managing a charging station.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree, but the challenge becomes, the challenge becomes being able to have a network that's out there that can do the service and repair on the equipment, and so that becomes a challenge. And for us, it's turnkey, so we don't have staffing that does it. So you would have to create positions in order to do it. You would have to keep inventory in order to do it. You would have other impacts if you bought it in house. So,
but what I'm hearing is that there will be a search for another vendor or a more open RFP process?
Yeah, we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Do our market due diligence on the market research side like we always do, and then we would compete it through the county's competitive process through procurement.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that. And based on, again, the conversation of where we're going and the installation across the county and the cost not only of that and using funds from various sources, but I think often overlooked, but clearly we're looking at it right now, is the maintenance cost of this.
Yeah, and I think that for now, with 30, it may not make sense to have that expertise in-house. At some point, the balance will shift when we start adding more stations, particularly when we add community stations. So I think that that's something to keep track of. But for the millions watching at home, this is an entrepreneur opportunity. I mean, this industry, we need some competition in here, so.
Call for green jobs, yes.
And I believe you're already connected, but one of the things that the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments is doing is for the region is looking at these issues under its EV initiative. And I know you all are familiar with that, but just wanted to do a plug for an upcoming board meeting that we're getting an update on that, I believe, at our next board meeting in May. And I know Mr. King at COG has been working on that. So hopefully we can also work with our regional partners to answer some of these questions as well. So thank you for your work on that.
Right. If I could say something back to what you were talking about. So we started, we initialized the meeting, initially met with the union, GEO, to start talking about doing an analytical work on what are we outsourcing, right, to see if we can insource and compare the costs of that. We picked a specific, not chargers, but we picked another specific operation to do that analysis. So we're starting to look at that because as you scale as an organization, it changes, right? And that's what I think you were getting at. And so we're sensitive to that, and not just chargers, but a lot of different operations that we outsource right now to see what the benefits would be of bringing them in-house.
Okay, we will accept the staff recommendation.
The next two items are fuel and oil and bulk fluids. Those are both being recommended as priority. We talked about fuel already. It's more of an art than a science in terms of forecasting those. But again, staff recommendation for fuel cost increase is to put on rec list as priority and to reevaluate next year as we, if it does not come off the rec list, we'll monitor it and evaluate it next year if a supplemental is needed. And then there's also an increased cost for oil and bulk fluids. It's a $200,000 increase, a significant increase from last year where the increase was $40,000. Again, this is partly due to rising commodities cost, inflation, and increased transit vehicle usage, which does consume a lot of these. These are things like engine oil, transmission fluid, coolant. So staff recommendation for oil and bulk fluids is also to put on the rec list as priority.
So without hearing any objection, we'll accept the fuel, number 4, and the increased oil and bulk fluids.
And just two more issues. The last cost item is our decreased costs and realignments. Most of these are non-discretionary or centrally adjusted, things like FY23 personnel costs, annualization of those. I will note the one decreased cost that is of interest to the committee might be Fleet is recommending lapsing 4 vacant mechanic technician positions. These are mechanics that would work on the ride-on fleet. This would save about $377,000 next year in '24. And it's based partly on underutilization of the ride-on fleet, reduced transit demand. So just wanted to point that out. Staff recommendations to approve all of the reductions that the CE is recommending.
Without objection, and I don't think we officially signaled our approval of the first 2 items, fleet management information system and then the light fleet as well, so we'll support that.
And just one last item, just to not a decision point, just something to be aware of. We looked at fleet's vacancies. There are no long-term vacancies in that there are no vacancies that are more than a year long, but there are a number of trends with vacancies that have been occurring the last couple of years. We've had some increased retirements, departures, and these have been turnover has been primarily in the mechanic positions, which is partly driven by, again, a competitive job market. Now, Fleet is partly alleviating that by implementing an apprenticeship program. So far, they've filled about 10 of the 14 slots with apprentices for mechanic technicians. So there's some success there to try to alleviate this issue. But it's something we'll monitor, and staff here can speak to more of that.
Yeah, the apprenticeship program is something we're real proud of. It was a vision that happened probably about 4 years ago. We met with the one school that has the program. We started talking to Montgomery College, and we knew that there was a shortage of trades out there, and we knew this was needed. And quite frankly, if we didn't have it, we'd probably have 15 vacancies right now. The good news with the people that are leaving us, 9 of them were promotions, so we're doing good on the succession planning side. We're developing our people, and they're able to move up into the ranks of our management or analytical staff jobs, which is a good thing. But this apprenticeship program, we could do better, and it's holistic over the whole county. Like I said, we have the schools involved. We're involved in the college. We're starting to, really talk to now for more of advanced training. There's the trade schools around the country have closed, a lot of them, and everything's getting more technical. High voltage training is critical, which we started. It's very dangerous work. So we're very sensitive to that. Right now, we use one of our contractors to do that work as we ramp up our staff to learn it. We have possible fuel cell buses coming. Again, new technology. So the technicians, where you got a shortage, and it keeps getting harder for these staff members. Our mechanics, we have about 200, are top rate. I think I would take them against anybody. And this apprenticeship program, I think, is critical for maintaining that. So we're hoping to be able to grow it and keep improving it, and getting more in sync with the other entities that we're trying to build this enterprise for training. So. Oh, and one last thing, I forgot. It goes back to your answer. So the grants now are top. You have to write, when you're competing for a grant, you have to write if you have an apprentice program. And in a lot of grants, you will not get that grant unless you have that. And it has to be a registered program, which we're in the middle of doing. It has already been beneficial when we do compete for these funding opportunities. So that's something that I'm glad that we put in place, because we'd be struggling possibly right now to get that grant money.
Yeah, that's great. I think this is a really exciting endeavor, and I think that we'll see more and more of these as we progress. So have you looked at with the number of applicants versus the number of positions, Are you able to get as many people in as you can? How do we expand this program?
Well, so we had to be creative in creating the apprenticeship program this past year. And what I mean by that is, I mean, we had to utilize existing vacancies and underfill positions in order to do it. And so part of, so we've been meeting nationally with some of the other agencies that are starting apprenticeship programs, mostly transit maintenance agencies, because transit's so grant heavy, and most of them are running into the same issue, right? So one is having the staffing to monitor apprentices. Because it's a little bit different. You're hiring folks that, before we were hiring journey level technicians. So they were coming to us, they were already fully vetted, already ready to go. And so now you have these great young kids that are very energetic, very interested in what they're doing, very excited, but they need guidance, right? So it's managing it. So part of growing the program is being able to grow the resources to be able to support it. And then the other piece is coming up with a strategy to have folks in pipeline. Folks, as we, the real vision I see with the apprenticeship program is that it'll give us an opportunity to take folks from a very low level as far as, like, say, low level training, like, say, right out of high school or very early out of a trade program, and be able to move them through the process. My ultimate goal is to be able to move them up into management positions as they move upwardly through the organization. One of the challenges is even working with institutions like Montgomery College, so one of the things in our meetings with Montgomery College we've been really pushing for is to develop an accredited curriculum. Is because what I envision is not only getting them as technicians and bringing them in as technicians, but building them as first-line supervisors. And in order to do that, I need to be able to educate them in a way that they can continue their education so that I can use them in the management. One of the disconnects in the trades is traditionally there's a clear disconnect between, like, say, getting a trade and moving on to college, and usually the individuals have to make a real commitment to do it, typically on their own, either sacrificing by working late hours in the evening and going to school during the daytime. And so so the goal behind it for me is to have a more holistic process to help staff my organization moving forward. So
And I'm going to jump holistic,
Sorry about
and
that.
I'm going to jump in on, well done, Calvin. The vision was that we would have people down in the school's shop so that when they come for the interview, it's not the first time they've seen us. And the school could come up and bus their students up and spend the day in our shops and things like that. We don't have the staffing or funding to do that right now. Same thing with the college. The other thing, and I promise you the schools didn't put me up to do this, but we need more than one school with a tech program. And that's not just mechanics. I also have facilities. There's no plumbers out there. There's no electricians out there. Your question back about the grid, are we ready for the chargers? But where are we getting the electricians for this stuff? For whatever reason, we're at a shortage with tradespeople. We're trying to mitigate that, and we're doing a good job. I'd like to grow it to plumbers and electricians and HVAC as well, but it starts in the high schools. And if we have more programs to recruit from, and we're integrated, that we're down there and they see our faces, so that when they come out, some of them will go work for the dealers in Montgomery County, and that's a good thing because we need them for our economy. But we're going to compete, and we're going to try to get them to be an EV, a BEV, battery electric, or a fuel cell bus, or whatever it might be, that they can come in and they see that career growth. That, hey, it's not just, if they have more ambitions, then mechanics are a great career, but if they want to be in management or do something on the finance side, Gary came from Fleet, there's a career track. Okay. So we need to get there. We have a great start, a good foundation, but we need to build that house on top of that so we can truly have that roof where it doesn't leak.
That's great. I'm with you 100% on this. Thank you.
Edison, the program at Edison is a wonderful program. We need more of them. I think we all agree on that. And I think we agree on all the recommendations, staff recommendations here. So Mr. Cook and Mr. Jones, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Okay. Next item is the FY24 recommended operating budget for the motor pool fund contribution non-departmental accounts.
Yeah, this is very straightforward. This is the CE is recommending $0, and the reason for that is this is the fund that it pays for the one-time purchase of new additional vehicles to the fleet, so not replacement vehicles, which are covered within the fleet budget itself. And so for FY24, there are no requests for new additional vehicles. Therefore, the budget is being recommended $0.
That might be the best budget decision we have to make within this entire FY24 budget. All those in favor of not recommending anything as requested. As requested. Very good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mia. That was easy too. Okay, we are now joined by Dr. Orland, and I will ask our friends from WMATA to join us as well. Mr. Scott, Mr. Goldman, and I see Director Conklin as well. Good morning. So we're going to take up and get a briefing on the WMATA's proposed FY24 budget, which is 2 weeks or 1 week, just 1 week new.
Yes. Last Friday, the 14th, the board passed the budget. So the timing of your meeting today was perfect. So thank you.
We always try to time well, on time. That's what transportation's all about. Dr. Orland, I see that there's a presentation queued up, and WMATA will walk us through that.
Yeah. Charles Scott will give the presentation, and I'll have some comments since there's.
You'll hold your comments,
budget,
Mike. Okay.
I don't fully agree with.
Great.
Great. Well, Chairman Glass, board members Balk and Stewart, thank you for the opportunity. Again, for the record, Charlie Scott, Government Relations Officer for WMATA, and glad to be joined here by Board Member Goldman and Director Conklin. Before I get into the budget, just a couple of brief updates. I know the public always is interested in where we are with our rail fleet as well as with our bus network redesign. So brief update on our 7000 series. We did receive concurrence from WMSC earlier this month to go into the final phase of our return to service plan. So we're pleased to see that. So we'll be moving to a 15-day interval for the inspections. And then the plan has us doing that for a set interval and then moving to 30-day interval between inspections. And ultimately, the goal, of course, is to have as many of the 7000 series rail cars back in service so that we can be running the service that we are budgeting for the system. So we do hope that our FY24 budget will actually realize the budgeted level of service on the rail system. On the bus system, also, good timing. Just this past week, we have launched our next phase of our bus network redesign, sharing basically a visionary network of what our bus system, Metro bus system, can be across the region. Here locally, we are partnering with the county. The county is embarking on its own Ride On Reimagine study. So we're trying to do this as much as possible in concert so that customers can kind of see where our bus network and our concepts for our bus network can also fit into with what Ride On is looking at for basically redesigning where the route should be and then also the frequency of the service. Before now, we've had robust feedback already, 12,300 customer interactions, 5,300 survey responses, 18 pop-up events, and that was all leading up to what we released earlier this week. And now starting yesterday, we're launching into 50 events over 50 days. Not every day gets one event, but 50 events over 50 days across the region, trying to solicit feedback again from our customers in many different avenues to go where the riders are. So now I will launch into the slide deck. So again, this slide you saw before. This is kind of a precursor of what the direction was from our board. So I'll focus on the more simplified and equitable fares. Basically, our board asked us, and our management as well, to find a way to make the somewhat complicated fare system on the Metro Rail side especially more simple for our riders. Also focus on equity, focus on the low-income riders, and all at the same time generate more revenue for the system, to operate the system. So basically, it's kind of like if you go back to elementary school, you can have a Venn diagram of, a flat fare system is simple, but it doesn't generate the revenue you need and all the different permutations. So we basically tried to see where the Venn diagram overlapped, and that was basically what we brought to the public in terms of the proposed budget. In terms of the proposed budget, I'll highlight a couple brief things here. Passenger revenue, you see that coming in at $403 million. So that's about $100 million more than FY23. That's mostly driven by, return to the office, return to ridership that we're projecting in the system. And then the next line down is really I guess you can call it a highlight of the slide, but that's the federal relief. So those are the last dollars that we have in COVID federal funding. So we'll be expending our final COVID federal relief funds in FY24 to the tune of $561 million. And that will also be highlighted on my last slide when I get to FY25. Next slide, Glenn. Yep. So going into the next slide, you can see our recommended service changes. One more. So then again, as I mentioned, in FY23, we have not been able to run the budgeted level of service across the system because of the fleet availability. So again, if you look at the recommendation for FY24, on the red line, there really is no change, but in reality, there will be a change in terms of what our riders realize, because right now we're at about 8 minutes, because that's what we have in terms of available fleet. But we are projecting to go to AM rush of 5 minute and then 6 minute during most of the day when we're not in the AM or PM rush. And I'll comment here that, not surprisingly, what we have seen is that the peaking that we had pre-COVID of the surge of riders right during the AM and PM rush is not what we're seeing anymore. So we've tried to adjust our rail service plan to basically have good, robust service across the day, and then just modestly more service right when we do have the highest level of demand, which is still during those rush hour periods. Going on to the next slide, we can look at the fares that were proposed. Again, left-hand side is what the current fare system is. It is somewhat complex. On the right-hand side, slightly less complex, and that was kind of the direction we got from our board. So again, this is what we proposed. So the proposal was to have the max fare increase by 50 cents and also to have a standard mileage rate for our riders, and then also to eliminate the off-peak fares. And then the reduced fare program for the seniors, right now, today, seniors with a senior card pay half of the peak fare. That's often confusing. Our customer service office gets calls like, oh, I thought it was half off the fare, but really it's currently half off the peak fare. And then late night, weekend, we're proposing to continue that at the $2, and then on the bus side, proposing to continue that at the $2. So going on to the next slide. So we did do extensive customer outreach. We're pleased that we had over 1,000 more responses this year compared to last year. We're partly more riders in the system, potentially also greater effort on our part to reach riders and encourage their feedback. My daughter texted me a screenshot of her phone. She had gone into the transit app and was encouraged to take the survey. So, so hopefully the things we're doing to try to reach young people across the region are working to get more feedback on what we're proposing to do. And then we can go into the next slide with some of the responses that we had. Again, our feedback, mostly still Metro rail riders. Rail riders seem to respond more frequently than our bus customers. But we were pleased to see that 59% of the responses came from people who had ridden Metro bus as well in the previous week. We had 73% responding in favor of the fare simplification of eliminating the off-peak pricing, 85% approval of implementing the low-income fare program, and then looking at the low-income fare riders, 2/3 of the low-income fare riders opposed having the max fare go up from $6 to $6.50. And then on another side, not as relevant to Montgomery County, but in Prince George's County, the Green Line, to increase service on the southern end of the Green Line, the changed rail service plan includes a turnback, reinstituting a turnback, really, of the yellow line at Mount Vernon Square. So that was approved by a majority of the feedback, but definitely a lower number there than you see for some of the other proposals that we had. And then the next slide goes over what the board did change from based on some of the customer feedback. So one thing that was changed was actually not increasing the max rail fare. So the max rail fare will stay at $6 rather than going up to $6.50. Another key thing that we heard from riders in the ADA community is the complexity of the fare system for ADA riders. By FTA guidance, we can charge double the comparable fixed route fare. And we had been capping that at $6.50, but they requested that we reduce that to $4. So this now means that most of the Metro Access fares will be $4 because that's basically twice the bus fare. There will be some instances, for instance, here locally, if ride-on is $1 and that ride-on fare is what your Metro Access fare is being calculated on, then we're, of course, still capped at $2 because that's double the $1 fare. But by and large, most of the trips will be $4 for Metro Access riders. One thing, we're on the yellow line, we're currently finishing up work to return the yellow line bridge tunnel to service. One of the mitigating bus improvements we did as a shuttle run was this 11Y service, bringing that back as a shuttle during that service. And when you bring something back, people ride it and enjoy it. So the response we got was, please keep that as a route even after the yellow line reopens. So that will be added back to the Metrobus network with FY24. And then also some improved service late night on green and yellow. So that brings me to a couple things that for the council's consideration. The first one is actually one from a year ago, but at Metro we increased the transfer discount for Metro Bus and Metro Rail transfers from 50 cents to $2. So right now, we'd like to see if other jurisdictions want to help match that to make it more uniform across the system. So today, if a rider gets off of Metro Rail, gets off the Red Line in Montgomery County, and they use a Metro Bus route to finish their journey home, that Metro Bus fare is free because we're discounting at $2. However, if they get on a ride-on bus, the ride-on fare is reduced by 50 cents because 50 cents is the traditional discount. So that's one consideration. Director Conklin mentioned that there are also budget considerations as well for the county. So that was not recommended by the county. The other one is low-income fare discount. This is, of course, brand new for us. We're implementing this in FY24. So riders will have will pay 50% of the fare in effect whenever they tap on a Metro Bus or the Metro Rail system. We're also asking jurisdictions across the region that are currently charging a fare if they want their local bus operators to also honor that 50% discount. So in this case, it would be, the fare would go from $1 to 50 cents. Again, I think the county's viewpoint on that is that the county already has taken the $2 fare down to $1 for all riders, not just low income. But again, the question is, will a low income rider with that pass on their card be expecting that when they board a ride-on bus? So again, something for the council to consider. Next slide, a couple upcoming events. I mentioned that we're launching this week. So for Montgomery County, we have a virtual event focused on Montgomery and Prince George's County bus network changes. And then we have two pop-up events, again, to share what we're doing with the bus network redesign. And then the final slide, Glenn, this is the bad news slide. Not this slide, Glenn. Next slide, Glenn. That was a good news slide. This is the bad news slide. So this slide, again, I commented earlier that FY24, we are expending our final federal COVID relief funds. So, and also we're using some funds capital, what usually would be capital budget funds to help supplement the operating budget in FY24. So when you look at those two major line items, that means that we start the budget process in FY25 with almost a $750 million hole, which is something that far exceeds anything I've ever experienced in my time at Metro. So I'll leave it on that not positive note.
Thank you.
And Mr. Goldman, yeah.
As usual, Charlie's slides started with the good news and ended with the bad news. But let me try and drill down on what the budget may mean for Montgomery County. The Metro FY24 budget has a lot of good things in it. The simplified fare structure alluded to, more rail and bus service, the low-income subsidy program, no across-the-board fare increase, and capped fees for Metro Access riders. The big mistake here, in my opinion, is the board's decision to raise fares for off-peak long-haul riders by excessive amounts. The fare for someone going Shady Grove to Metro Center between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. goes from $3.85 today and through June 30th to $6, a 56% increase. Round trip, that means paying $12 for a trip that is $7.70 today. A Bethesda Farragut North rider would see a 23% increase in that off-peak period. So it's not just the longest trips that are impacted. This comes as the WMATA board is reducing fares for riders under 3 miles to $2 from $2.25, and bus fares are held constant at a very cheap $2. The board decision makes no sense to me. It is both unfair to burden the fare increase on one segment of Metro riders, and it reduces incentives for long-haul riders to return to Metro, a group of riders that Metro needs if it is going to reverse ridership losses from the pandemic and help close that budget gap that the slide points to. Now, there's better news from WMATA for Montgomery County in actions taken by WMATA on 2 county development projects at North Bethesda and Forest Glen. At North Bethesda, which is the County Executive's University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing project, Metro will issue a RFQ, request for a qualification, shortly to help select a developer for that site. And at Forest Glen, would see a vast parking lot there replaced with affordable housing of roughly about 1,000 plus units, sponsored by the county's own HOC, Housing Opportunities Commission. A hearing on that project will be scheduled by Metro in the near future. As Mr. Scott's slides preview, WMATA will be doing hearings on the Better Bus Project's visionary bus routes restructuring. This has some exciting bus improvements for the county, including extensions of the 30 routes beyond Wisconsin Avenue to Bethesda, beyond the district line, and the same for the L routes on Connecticut Avenue. And there is, in the vision, a new interstate route from Bethesda over the new American Legion Bridge, or what will be the new American Legion Bridge, to Tyson's Corner, is also part of that vision that will be out there for public comment. Unfortunately, some more bad news, this visionary concept would require a 30 to 35% increase in the number of buses in the fleet, bus operators, and maintenance personnel, and a likely similar increase in local Metro bus subsidies. As Metro faces a $740 million funding deficit next year, as that last slide portrays, it is very hard to expect this vision of regional bus service to be realized anytime soon, I'm sorry to say. And finally, as noted, Metro faces this $740 million funding gap starting in the year beginning July of 2024. With the Republican House majority in Congress, my belief is that relief is not going to come from the feds to close that gap. That means service cuts, fare increases, and/or increased subsidies for Maryland, D.C., and local Virginia jurisdictions, or some combination of thereof, will be needed to close the funding gap. A more midterm solution over the next couple years would be some kind of regional sales tax increase to fund Metro operations in part, but that will take a good deal of regional cooperation and actions by the Maryland and Virginia legislature and the D.C. Council. So my report as well ends it up on a fairly dismal note as well. So Charlie and I and Director Conklin are here to answer your questions and respond to some of the issues, I guess, raised by Charlie in his slides.
Sure. Well, thank you for the presentation, sobering as it might be. And I'll say that, Mr. Scott, I very much appreciated the format of the presentation and the design and infographic. I think it's easy to understand, and so kudos to the team for putting it together in an easily digestible way. I have a few different thoughts, and so let me just start with my overall thought. Mr. Goldman, I appreciate your staunch advocacy and support for residents and transit users in Montgomery County and in Maryland. You've been appointed to this board to advocate for Maryland, and you're doing exactly that, and so thank you. And we know that the WMATA board has 3 jurisdictions to which it has to respond to, and the combination thereof is what makes these conversations tricky. Is Metro and Metro Rail specifically a commuter rail for residents who lack other access to be able to get from the suburbs and even exurbs into downtown DC or some of the inner suburbs, or is it a more traditional subway route akin to New York City, where folks are taking it for a few stops within a tightly defined area? That question has never really been answered in the decades since the metro system first came online in the 70s. I think this budget is getting it closer to an answer, and I think it is moving away from being a commuter rail into more of a subway line. And the fare structure, I think, supports that conclusion. And I think that is to the detriment of suburban riders who, if we as a community want to make sure that there is traffic relief, we have to provide alternatives. And raising fares for suburban riders, I do not think provides the alternative that we're looking for. And so, Mr. Goldman, thank you for your advocacy there. To my questions, one of the first slides, Mr. Scott, was about the percentage of fees or percentage of the budget that is made up by passenger revenue and then federal support. And I think it was one of the very first slides, Dr. Orland, if you want to pull that back up. No, it's okay. I wrote down the number. Oh, it's already in the packet. Thank you. Thank you, council member. So 17.4% of this the FY24 budget is from passenger revenue. How has that fared historically? I presume this is a very low percentage.
Yes, no, absolutely. So pre-COVID, I've seen it dip from just over 50 into the low 40s. So I think we were, still over 40% of the operating budget was funded from passenger revenues. And I would include in that basically non-government subsidy. So we get the non-passenger revenue, that's advertising, joint development revenue, those things. But basically the government subsidy from Virginia, Maryland, DC had always consistently been below 60% of the budget.
If I can add, historically, it's been around 50%. A few years before COVID, it started dropping, and then precipitously dropped. Between Metrorail and Metrobus, it's different. Metrorail was well over 50%. Metrobus was, I don't think it was ever more than 40. I think it was even less than that.
In the 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's consistent with other bus systems.
Sure.
Let me just add, to confuse you with the facts, that the passenger revenue number here shown of 400 million, actually pre-COVID passenger revenue accounted for about 800 million. So the loss is about 50% in terms of what passenger revenue is in the budget at this point in time.
Right. And there's lots of conversations and data points shared regarding ridership level. And I think I'd seen communication from WMATA and the general manager about cherry blossom season being the highest ridership. Is that correct, Mr. Scott? Highest ridership in a
Oh, yes. No, we've
while?
been recording many of our ridership highs
Yeah.
since the, since the pandemic started.
Sure. Which is great. And then, I mean, there's a direct tie between that and the passenger revenue. And so looking at it through those two lenses, I think is very, very helpful here.
Again, the ridership numbers have been high for the cherry blossom period, but at least the last numbers that I saw, which were for January, February months of this year, rail ridership was still at about 50% of pre-COVID levels. So it's got a long way to go to get up even higher. And I think even this budget, the 24 budget, it forecasts it to be only getting up to about 75% of pre-COVID levels for that whole year of FY 2024. So there's still, yes, we can take some pleasure in the cherry blossom rates, but the numbers still have a long way to go, especially on the rail side.
Sure. Last question I have before I turn it over to my colleague. I shared my thoughts about the subway versus commuter dynamics. In the board conversations, in the deliberations over this budget, was that philosophical question raised of how this budget informs the direction of WMATA, what type of service it actually is?
Yes and no. I mean, there was some discussion from some of my colleagues from the district pointing out that, to make it somewhat more attractive for long-haul commuters, we do have the max fares that were in place of $6, and it was $3.85. And there was some recognition, or at least maybe say a belief on their part, never substantiated that I saw, that many of those long-haul riders are being subsidized by their employers in terms of their travel benefits. And so the impact might be less than it's perceived. At least that's what some of them believe. But I think there's a sense by my district colleagues that, that they basically have a subway system, and they want to make it as attractive for riders who are traveling short distances, that under 3 miles, as possible. And this budget certainly encourages that kind of, as you described it, short hop service from one downtown station, Farragut North, to Union Station, or going Mount Vernon to Nats Park and things like that.
And again, I understand that, and I'm originally from Long Island, and grew up taking the Long Island Railroad. But you knew what that system was. It was designed to expressly be a commuter rail with varied price points that essentially took you into the city, where then you had a subway system, which was a different type of system with a flat fare. And for the life of the Metro system, we've been fumbling through this, and I think this budget sets it on a course that I don't think serves the residents of Montgomery County and the suburban communities as well as it should. But unlike the two presentations, I'll try to end on a good note. And the positive note is that the low-income fare discount is a step towards transit equity, which is deeply important to me, deeply important to the region, and so anything that we can do to provide more support for people who need it, who rely almost solely on public transportation, be it Metro Bus or Metro Rail, is a step in the right direction. So there is some good in this budget too. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and for the work that you do. I was a suburban commuter for 15 years, from Germantown to Department of Energy. Not to date myself, but it was before you had to pay for parking at the garages. So that was, 15, 17 years ago. The point was that the cost of taking the metro was never a question for me. I never even thought of an alternative. I took the metro. It was a minimal cost, and I think that people, with the cost of parking, with the cost of coming from the outer suburbs of Montgomery County, it is a factor. So just that point that the council president has made over and over again. But I think part of the issue is this a subway? Is it a commuter rail? This is an ecosystem, and DC, the city of DC, is desperately trying to get people back into DC from an economic development perspective. And so I commuted every day for 15 years, and I bought lunch, and I stayed, I had dinner, I went to shows, all those things. And so I think that, I know that it's not WMATA's responsibility to help the ecosystem of the district, but you're such an important partner in that, and I think that it's important to make sure that the commuter system is achievable for most riders. So I just wanted to make that point. We have no clue what's going to happen with telework. So we're all in this grand social experiment of what's going to happen over the next 5 years. So I think that we just need to be aware that we're not back to normal if there ever is going to be a normal set point. So I think that's important. And from the perspective of the cost of metro versus the cost of driving, a lot of vacancies, commercial vacancies in DC, and they're looking at all kinds of incentives. And parking is one of the incentives that I've seen come up in commercial deals in the district. So I think that whereas all those years ago when I looked, I never even considered driving to DC. I think that calculus has changed a little bit. So just wanted to share those points. I think that we're going to be in a state of uncertainty for a few years more on that. I did want to just ask the question about the federal relief, and I haven't delved into the budget of WMATA for years now, but there is a federal component. There is a federal component that the federal government pays as riders. Am I making that up, or?
So traditionally, at least in the last 20 plus years, any federal funding has been only for the capital costs of the system. Mm-hmm. So the federal COVID relief funds that WMATA and other transit systems across the country received were basically, that was the first time in decades that we had received funds that were that could be spent on the operating side of the ledger.
Okay, thank you. I must have misremembered. I thought as a major employer they contributed.
So employees may receive their own commuter benefits. So in that regard, federal employees receive commuter benefits that they can use to fund their metro, but it's not a direct
Okay.
authorization. Right?
Great. Thank you.
One comment I wanted to make in response to this dichotomy between a DC subway system and a system for bringing in long-haul commuters is the fact that the Maryland contribution to WMATA's existence is very large. The 1.2 billion subsidy, annual subsidy, has Maryland now as the largest single entity providing a subsidy, larger than DC and larger than the Virginia jurisdictions combined. So that I think the last time I looked, the total amount that Maryland is providing to WMATA annually is in the range of 700 to 800 million, which covers both the operating subsidy, which is probably in the range of roughly 1/3 of this, around a little more than 400 million, maybe 420, 430 million, plus another 300 million on the capital side. So
Why is that? Why does Maryland provide the single largest amount of the three jurisdictions?
because my understanding, and staff, Charlie can explain it in more better terms, is that two reasons. The max fare basically becomes a part of the subsidy. And so Maryland, a share of Maryland subsidy is calculated as the cost difference between the max fare and the theoretical fare that people would pay. And so the district obviously doesn't have any
Distance traveled is
distance traveled. is
factor
part
in
of
that
the
algorithm.
factor.
Although I suspect with the Silver Line, that might change.
Maybe, but still, and Director Conklin has a better understanding of these numbers. The number of riders on the Red Line far exceeds anything historically on the Orange or Silver Line out to those areas. And the other point I just wanted to make is there is a second factor, and that has to do with metro access. How can I describe this? DC at least has a program, a local program, which takes some of the ADA riders on their own system. And Maryland doesn't have an overall system like that. Montgomery County has one which reduces its component, but there's nothing similar in Prince George's County. So there's a big metro access subsidy bite that comes out of the large use of metro access in Prince George's County that isn't matched by anything that's happening in the district or in Montgomery County. So I think those two factors account for why Maryland has ended up being the largest provider of subsidy for WMATA currently.
Yeah, Director Conklin.
I want to mention one thing in the budget that I think hasn't been talked about so far and is really important. In the early stages of this budget proposal, WMATA was considering reinstating the turnbacks on the Red Line. And I really want to give the board and WMATA's management a lot of credit for dropping that strategy during these discussions. That would really be detrimental to the economic development initiatives in Twin Brook, North Bethesda, Shady Grove, and also would reduce service to some of our community that's most dependent on this in the Glenmont and Wheaton area. So I really do think that's a positive step in this budget that I didn't want this discussion to end without that being mentioned.
So I'll end this conversation by using the insight that Mr. Goldman just shared, in that if Maryland is the single largest regional contributor to the WMATA budget, and it is largely due to the volume of ridership that is on the Red Line, which is predominantly, if not exclusively, Montgomery County residents within Maryland, almost exclusively. We need our concerns to be heard. And I look forward to hearing more about conversations that you will be having as time goes on with Governor Moore and his transportation secretary, who is no stranger to the operations of WMATA, so that we can potentially do some course correction and return some equity back to the fare structure in Montgomery County, because what Councilmember Balcom said is absolutely true, and we mentioned this at the last briefing that we had before your budget was approved, that if the district and the federal government wants to bring more people back into the workplace, and we need to help them, and raising fares on those who take the Red Line into downtown DC is not necessarily the way to encourage them to get back to work in the office. I'll end there because we have a few other items on our agenda today, but thank you for this very insightful presentation. And then Mr. Goldman, once again, thank you for being an incredible advocate for the residents of Montgomery County and Maryland.
Thank both of you for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Okay. We are going to turn to committee items number 4 and 5 now, which are supplemental appropriations to the FY23 operating budget, Department of Transportation Transit Services, in the amount of $14,409,927. And the FY24 operating budget for the Department of Transportation Mass Transit Fund and amendments to the FY23 to 28 Capital Improvements Program. Dr. Orland.
Good morning. Thank you. The executive sent over the supplemental on March 15th. You held a public hearing on this a couple days ago. There were no speakers. The request, as you pointed out, is for about $14.4 million. About $7.9 million of that is personnel costs associated with retroactive payments to bus operators and transit coordinators. This is effectively a program that the council has already approved in the past, but you haven't approved the actual appropriation yet, which has to do with the collective bargaining agreement required that any compensation adjustment resulting from the reclassification be retroactive to the start of FY22. You approved the supplemental appropriation to fund the reclassification in April of 2022. The operators and coordinators were placed onto a new salary schedule approximately June 2022, and the retroactive salary payments were calculated and processed at the start of FY23. The rest of the appropriation, a little under half, is for operating expense. Mr. Nalvin mentioned earlier when you talked to DGS about the motor pool, about the increase in cost for fuel, but also increase in cost of parts, maintenance repair services, to about $6.5 million. So, and there, we do have a report from the Office of Operational Equity and Social Justice supporting the positive impact of this appropriation on BIPOC residents. So I'm recommending approval of the supplemental.
Director Conklin.
I think Dr. Orland described this appropriately. This is a measure that was approved in FY22 but was not able to be enacted within that calendar year. So the compensation increases are not really new allocation to this. There's a carryover from one year to the other. And you've also had a lot of detail earlier from DGS on the motor pool related expenditures, a good component of it related to the price of fuel.
I am fine with that, and also just want to note the reduction in FTEs, which I guess was we talked about that in the previous conversation, but on page 2 in the packet, from 897.5 to 885.5. So minor reduction, but as we are talking about personnel and cost savings in this budget, just want to highlight that as well. Any comments?
I have comments about compensation, but we'll talk about that next week at the full council.
Very good.
Thanks.
The committee's 2-0 for their supplemental.
Yes.
Okay. Next item is the FY24 operating budget for DOT, and as Mr. Glass mentioned, there is a reduction of 12 positions, FTEs, in personnel costs of the Mass Transit Fund. The overall increase is proposed as about 5.7%, which is, compared to other departments, actually relatively modest. Just going to go through some of the items that are an addition over the approved budget last year. First of all, there's $308,000 is the top of page 3 for a beginning of a contract with BUP, who will in turn be contracting with their own provider to replace the 3 Bethesda circulator buses with zero-emission buses. And so this contractor would not just provide the buses, but also pay for insurance, maintenance, and other operating costs. This is a continuing cost. Obviously, buses don't cost $100,000 each. They cost a lot more. So this will be an additional cost over the next several years to be able to pay for this change. Because it's part of the climate action policy of the council, with the county, which is pretty high priority, I'm recommending this be added to the reconciliation list, also with a high priority.
Appreciate that. Quick question for the Bethesda circulator. Where would they charge? We know that the county has charging facilities.
Yeah, the contractor is required to provide all associated maintenance and operation with these vehicles, so they would charge at their facility.
Okay. Do we have that they have? I guess this would be the Bethesda Urban Partnerships contract,
Yeah,
right?
we-
Do we
we
know
have-
who they're contracting with?
Yes, RMA Worldwide.
Okay. Do we know where their depot is?
They have a base of operation down, I believe, on Wilkins Avenue.
Oh, okay. Okay. Support without objection? Yep.
Okay. The next item is a series of recommended increases to the sub-programs within the Transportation Services Improvements Fund. This is the fund that's funded by Uber and Lyft surcharges. This is an interesting fund because although it's part of the Mass Transit Fund, which is a tax-supported fund, internally it's not tax-supported. As I mentioned, it's Uber and Lyft fees. And so the money can really only be spent on these sub-programs. So to that extent, any reductions in this area will fall just to the reserve for this fund, which we'll talk about a little later. Anyway, there are 8 sub-programs. There are 4 of them, excuse me, for which the executive is recommending an increase. The biggest one is $155,000 for a call-and-ride subsidy. What happened is a couple years ago, the county received a grant from COG, which bought down the price of call-and-ride by $5.25 on the second book of, or second set of coupons someone would buy. So, for example, if you're in the poorest level of constituent, you generally would be paying $5.25 for $60 worth of rides, but you can also buy another another $60 worth of rides for another $5.25. So you could buy as much as $120 worth in a month for $10.50. What the COG program did was to say, if you're going to buy that second book, we'll make it free for you. We'll take $5.25 off, so it's $5.25 for $120 worth. And for the other tiers, there are 4 tiers in call and ride. You'll see them a little later in the packet, but it's been the same 4 tiers for a number of years. There's higher amounts that you pay as an individual for that $60, but the $5.25 discount applies also to the second book for those people. So it's a program that's been pretty popular. However, the funding runs out in August. And so what the executive is recommending is this $155,000 effectively continue this program through the rest of fiscal year 24. We don't know what his thoughts are in terms of extending it beyond that. We'll worry about that, I guess, when we see the FY25 budget. But for FY24, it's the $155,000. The other 3 sub-program increases are $59,000, roughly about a 10% increase for the budget for paying wheelchair accessible vehicle drivers, operators, at the subsidy of 40 cents per mile for operating that vehicle. That budget has been pretty well taxed, and so they think another 10% to that part of the budget is warranted. Same kind of thing for the 10% increase for the budget, the sub-budget for the per trip subsidy to wheelchair accessible vehicle drivers, which is $25. And finally, a 5% increase for the $10 per trip guaranteed ride home subsidy. Again, these subsidies themselves are not increasing, but the dollars needed to support those, given the projected usage, is what's recommended here. So I'm recommending, one more thing I want to say about this. I mentioned the reserve. If you look at the bottom of page 3, you see what the current balance is, over $3 million. It actually gets drawn down pretty far by FY26, but then it rebounds in 27 and 28. To the extent you decide not to approve any of these increases, any of these 4 increases, the money would go into that reserve and just be a little bit higher. But I'm recommending approving them and putting them on to high priority for funding. Again, the money can't be used really for anything else other than the reserve.
So given just last year we changed the formula for disbursements of the TSIF, how does this interplay with those regulatory changes?
It's completely consistent with what the council acted on last year with this. I do just want to introduce Sam Oji, you've met before, who oversees these programs, Sogan Sarafi, who's leading our business and administration functions in transit, and Phil McLaughlin, who is leading operations. These are, not that Ms. Balcom has seen this before, but these are different folks than would have been at the table last year. We've had some retirements that are in the process of restructuring the transit division, and these 3 individuals are leading that individual as a sort of council or committee themselves, and it's been a very effective experiment so far
We call them
this year. So, Sam, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add on that question in particular.
Yeah, the increases that were implemented for FY23 has been well received by the operators, the drivers. You've seen an increase in drivers participating in the program go from 40 to about 59, all driving wheelchair accessibles. You did increase the cost per trip that they're reimbursed for wheelchair accessibles from 10 to 25. You did the mileage from 10 cents to 40 cents, and then increased the cost for retrofit and purchase to $45,000. So it's been well received by the industry. Ultimately, the beneficiaries of this are the residents who will be transported as needed. We're not where we were previously with the number of cabs in the county, but we hope this helps it grow. So
a 50% participatory increase among drivers is a good number, and certainly shows that the changes that were made last year are starting to have an effect. And as long as this is consistent with those policies, I think we should move forward with it. Great.
So that,
Yes.
Tim, I think.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just,
No,
clerk in this role.
Read my mind.
When Ike Leggett was on Cherutini, he used to vote with his eyebrows.
Oh.
So, okay, the next item, top of page 4, the Transportation Management districts, by law, they're supposed to produce a report every 2 years. Last year was an off year, so they didn't do any reports. This year is an on year, so they're supposed to produce reports. The executive is recommending additional $20,000 over last year's budget, because again, there wasn't the reports last year. Effectively to get contractor assistance to work with Commuter Services Division to put out these reports. I'm recommending including it in the budget, but only with a priority rather than a high priority, because it's not direct service to the public. And if this weren't approved at all, the reports would still have to be done, but it would have to be done without the additional money, whether it's just done by in-house staff or DOT finds other places in their operating budget to shift it over to. I suppose they could do that. But the request is for $20,000.
So the TMD conversation is all about how workers get to the office. And we started having that conversation with WMATA, and we know that there are fewer folks going into their offices. And so I'm not inclined to support this appropriation, as small as it might be, because I'm not sure what information we're trying to get out of it.
Happy to comment on this. When the TDM law was updated, it was updated to include residential and workplace-based programs. So it is a little bit broader than just the workplaces in these transportation management districts. However, I'll restate that we did try to actually eliminate this reporting requirement when that law was updated, and council didn't accept that at the time. So I don't think there's any issue from the department, but again, we wouldn't want to, it is required by law, so I don't know if there's any way to waive a cycle of reporting under the law, because the funding isn't there for it.
So let's kind of work through this together, right? Given the information that WMATA has, given the information that we know through just transportation flow, is most of this information not already available?
It's an exercise of compiling, documenting, and producing reports. So yes, this information is out there in various formats, but somebody has to sit down and gather it all and analyze it and write the text that goes with it. So it's possible we could do this in a very streamlined fashion for the 2-year period and leave some of the traffic-related elements that are in that reporting out and focus on the data that's coming from the surveys and the employers that's available.
So I'll make
I'm not fighting.
No, I'm listening to you, right? And we're working we're working through this, and I agree with you. And so I'm going to make a recommendation that we remove the $20,000 for a report that we know will say there are fewer people going to the office and fewer people. We know what the transportation flow is in Montgomery County in the DC region, and we can work with the department in a way to convey that does not cost the taxpayers $20,000 for what is public information already out there. Councilmember.
Sure. Just a little bit of a devil's advocate. You know, we're in a very volatile time when it comes to commuters and commuter patterns and commuter experience. So I think that it's important to keep tabs on that. The issue is the data. If we have the data in other forms, the cost of someone sitting down and writing it does seem redundant. I'm not, I'm not wedded either way to this. So just explain to me, so you have the data, you have data on commuter behavior.
There's data collected through surveys and the TMDs on a routine basis.
Right.
There's American Commuter Survey data that's collected by the Census Bureau, and there's other data that's generally out there. What this reporting activity does is it goes and compiles all those different sets of data and tries to analyze and make some sense of them and compare them to the past situation in those TMDs. I don't think there's a lot of stability in the travel patterns right now. I'm not sure there's a lot of value in this reporting. Perhaps if the budget resolution said that the current cycle can be skipped, that would eliminate the need to do it this cycle, but not change the long-term need to do this, and we can revisit this in the FY20, I guess it would FY26 would be the next time these would be done. I think that would be a good path forward, but leave that to the council to consider.
I would suggest, the law does require a report. It doesn't say what the report consists of, so it can be
There is a fair amount of detail in the law about what's in the report.
It can be a very rudimentary, streamlined report. So I think a report has to get done. And the other thing here is this is money for operating expense. I mean, to a certain extent, some of the work is actually done by in-house staff. So if it could be streamlined to the point where you didn't need a contractor assistance, or if worse comes to worse, if you needed some, you could shift it over from somewhere else in your massive budget. The work can probably get done without the $20,000. But I think the way to address the issue you raised, Mr. Glass, about the need for the reporting is we had a TMD bill that was approved a few years ago. We're still waiting for it. I just talked to Sandy Brecker yesterday. The executive regs for that bill is going to be coming over, I believe, sometime in the near future, and perhaps this could be addressed at that time. More comprehensively by the T&E committee.
Right. It was about 4 years ago, pre-pandemic, that we had this conversation.
It was.
I distinctly remember it. And so I'm open to, if feasible, the language that Director Conklin stated that we put in the budget resolution, that this report is not necessary, or as staff is recommending, that there's other places in the Department of Transportation's budget where they could find the funds for a report. I'm open, but I'm clearly signaling that I do not support $20,000 for an additional $20,000 for the completion or creation of a report.
I think I need to go on record. I don't think we should put language in the budget resolution saying no report, because that would be contrary to the law. But the message is sent, I think, right? This can be very abbreviated.
Glenn, this question has come up on other subjects. Does language in a budget resolution actually trump an existing law?
No.
It may be something worthwhile to check with the council's attorney on. The county attorney feels.
I don't play lawyer on TV, but I know for a fact that it does not.
The county attorney feels that it does. So maybe there should be an attorney-to-attorney conversation.
I'm intrigued.
For the moment, I will concur with my colleague.
There we go. So let's strike that $20,000. And
Okay, the next item is-
we'll come back to the question.
Yeah. The next item is sort of related. It's, commuter survey for employees and residents. Another $20,000 is needed for the off-year survey to implement new approaches to TMD management. Again, I'm recommending this go on the reconciliation list, but only with a priority as opposed to a high priority.
I'm going to, again, motion to strike the $20,000 here.
So no on both, right?
I have little eyebrows, but I'm. Yes.
Okay, just checking. And there are several other smaller increases, relatively small, to other contracts, but these are contractually required, that if there's an increase in the cost of providing the service that's built into it, such as the basically the transit radio system has to be maintained, and that is part of the contract. There's a cost increase there. There's also cost increases for the route and scheduling software, transit marketing services, and the TRIPS commuter store, which are built into the contracts. And so I don't think we really have a choice on those.
Sure. Without objection.
I just want to make a point about ride-on. Every year we report as to what the ridership is on all the ride-on routes. They're on circles 20 to 24. What you'll find is that most of the routes are actually falling below the standard of efficiency that we've been using for decades. And this isn't strictly because of COVID. Actually, ride-on ridership's been falling for about the last 15 years or so, to the point where even though we've done things to try to boost ridership, like extending kids ride free and seniors ride free to all the time and reducing the base fare from $2 to $1, we're only getting half the riders we did 15 years ago. And so there is the Ride On Reimagined program, which is underway and it's been referred to, and I'm just pointing out that hoping that will be able to boost these numbers somewhat by making the ride-on system more cost effective than it has been. And the trend is in the opposite direction, despite all our best efforts. On call and ride, again, just include this information every year because it's of interest to folks. Again, it's just showing the income ranges that's required for call and ride. What you see in the top of page 5 is just for one person. In the back on circle 25, it shows different sets of numbers for families of more than one. But this is what the eligibility is, and there's also information in the packet as to how many riders there are within each of those categories. And then finally, in the operating budget side, one of the things we've looked at is vacancies, and here's the vacancy information for Mass Transit Fund. You'll see that there's a total of about $7.1 million budgeted for 76 full or part-time vacant positions within the fund. 279,000 of that amount is for vacancies that are more than 2 years, and vacant more than 1 year, 1.7 million. The recommended budget assumes 3.1 million in lapse savings, so there's like a $4 million difference between what's the cost of these vacant positions and the lapse. But I think we're going to be talking about this more generally once we get the response from the county executive on all the departments. And we gave your letter to the county executive, asked for that information to be provided by the end of next week, next Friday, so a week from tomorrow. So we'll hopefully take this up either in the May 1st committee meeting, or if it's not enough time to do it then, at the full council.
Thank you, Dr. Orland. So I'll pick up where you just left off, that after our conversation earlier this week on Monday, where we asked for non-recommended budget cuts, particularly within personnel, I then spoke with colleagues, shared a memo with colleagues that I sent then to the county executive requesting for non-recommended budget cuts across the entire budget for every department and agency, so that each committee could then take up these conversations with as much information as possible, recognizing that there were differences, as stated here in this committee, between the department and OMB, and further clarification that was necessary, and so that is what Dr. Orland is alluding to. But let me just shift a little bit regarding Ride-On and the reimagined program review that's underway. Can you give us just a quick update as to that process and how you think that process will inform the budget, for FY24 or even thereafter?
I'll start with the second half of your question. Okay. What we've proposed here is to not grow ride-on service any further beyond where it is right now. We are still below the pre-pandemic service level, and we've recommended holding at that level until the Ride-On Reimagine recommendations are available. We didn't want to start to restore things that we then took away because of the recommendations of that study. The study has gone through all of the existing conditions analysis and started to identify the travel patterns that are best served by this. And as you heard from WMATA, it's being done in a coordinated analysis and coordinated schedule with WMATA's plan. Mr. McLaughlin's actually overseeing that effort, so I'd let him speak a little bit more about what you think the trajectory is and where recommendations might be available, and then kind of what budget levels you're assuming in those recommendations.
So we're about, Phil McLaughlin, DOT. We're about 14 months into a 24-month study. As Chris mentioned, we went through existing conditions. We're coordinating bi-monthly with WMATA because their study's ongoing at the same time. A large portion of their service area is ours. The way the service is designed in Montgomery County today, and it's been designed for 40 years, is it's meant to be complementary and not competitive, to broaden the coverage area. So that's one of the points of emphasis we've been working with WMATA on, is to make sure that we have that coverage. We are going to continue outreach this summer, talking to focus groups, doing pop-up meetings, a lot of the same efforts that WMATA talked to you about is ongoing for us as well. We think by the end of this calendar year, we will have a service plan recommendation for our project coordination team to take a look at. Once we look at that in that forum and talk to our other transit advocacy groups, we think can begin to develop an implementation plan early next winter. So while, as Chris mentioned, not an FY24 item, likely an FY25 item.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that timeline. So we still have a year to go or so.
If the committee has time after the budget process is complete, we'd be happy to provide the presentation we've been doing with other stakeholder groups.
Great. We'll schedule that at another time outside of the budget. And Mr. McLaughlin, I would recommend that as the engagement starts ramping up in the communities, let the council and in particular the district council members know so that they can participate now that we have 7 districts with 5 new council members.
Will do.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, the next items are 3 actually CIP projects that were sent over by the executive on March 15th, having to do with transit. First is a new project for about $1.1 million for the ride-on fare equipment replacement, replaces fare vaults and fare boxes on ride-on buses, and I'm recommending approval of that as recommended by the executive.
Without objection.
The second is the facility planning mass transit project. This is the program that studies potential additions to the CIP that are transit projects. One was the study for the Clarksburg Transit Center, but what's happening here is that's being incorporated into the Maryland 55 South North PDF. So rather than a standalone study, it'll be part of the overall study of extending the 355 BRT from Montgomery County, Germantown up to Clarksburg. And then the other change within this project, other study, is had been the Hillendale bus layover study, but actually the developer of the Hillendale Gateway project is going to be doing that project, so there's no need for the county to be doing a study for that anymore. Between the two, there's a savings of about $960,000 in current revenue in the CIP, and I'm recommending approval.
Very good.
Just a question. So I understand the movement of the transit center. That makes sense. So the movement into the 355 project, that's for outer years, right? That's not within the current 6 years.
The money in the CIP, and we're going to get the new BRT amendments. We've actually gotten them now, but you'll be reviewing them Sunday 1st. And so the design for the it's just design money at this point, for Maryland 355, north of Germantown, Montgomery College, and south of Rockville, had been scheduled for FY '23 and '24. Now I believe it's '24 and '25. Is that right?
Yes, the work wasn't initiated because the
Wasn't.
funding wasn't
Right.
there.
Yeah, the money wasn't there. It was supposed to be funded with Opportunity Lanes funding, so it, of course, didn't happen. So it had to be delayed. But that means the design work having to do with the transit center presumably would be part of that effort and probably would be done sooner.
I think we have it, I want to say FY '27-ish, but I don't have the document in front of me.
Yeah, I don't either.
It is funds added to that PDF specifically for that purpose.
Right.
Great.
Gary?
Oh, I was going to point out the funding for the BRT design was 24 and 25, as you said, and I believe the design for Clarksburg was the 2 years following, so 26 and 27.
So it is an acceleration of the, in other words, in the facility planning project, it showed 26 and 27, and now it would be part of the 355 North BRT's design work, which is 24, 25.
No, I think we had separate funding for the transit center in 26 and 27, although I don't have the PDF in front of me, so I have to check.
Okay.
And Mr. Nalvin's right.
Okay. So with the committee's recommendation.
Yeah.
Concur.
And the final project is the North Bethesda Metro Station North Entrance. It's a little complicated. Here what happened was, we had the current approved CIP shows funding, some state funding for doing the design of that entrance. This is, of course, the entrance at the southeast corner of Rockville Pike and Old Georgetown Road. And then the rest of the work, the site improvements, utilities, and construction, the county put up 1/4, 25% of the cost of that. And the point being, we'd like to see more money coming from elsewhere, particularly the state. In this year's budget, we did get more money. We got an allocation of $600,000 more in FY '24 and a pre-authorization for $7.5 million more in FY '25. However, all of that money, the money for '24 and '24, is really not. It doesn't go to us. It goes to WMATA because it's a WMATA project. And so this PDF's been reconstituted to show it correctly that all it would show would be the county's contribution to the WMATA project. So that's why the cost estimate, the expenditure schedule goes way down, because all we're showing is the $8,115,000, if I remember correctly, of county funds that would be contributed to WMATA. I need to point out, I think I've pointed out in the past actually, and we reviewed this earlier in the budget, we've been using the same total cost estimate of about $35 million for a number of years. It's going to cost a lot more than that. WMATA is looking at several other options right now, the most expensive of which is to actually design the entrance to allow a building to be built on top of it, and it might cost twice as much as that. But we won't really have a better idea of that for at least another year. So I'm not recommending any change to our contribution to it, the $8.1 million, 8.115. The money gets moved out a little bit just because the state funds for the design and the first part of maybe site work is now committed to WMATA. But I think we're prepared for a higher cost estimate next year, and we'll see where the funds can come from that. So anyway, I'm recommending approval of the PDF that shows up on circles 29 and 30.
So thank you for that overview. I think the conversation of this dovetails nicely out of the conversation that we just had regarding Clarksburg and Hillendale, because I think the similarities are that they are parts of other projects, and we're trying to figure out who funds them and when. And I know that this project remains in our budget, and it should remain a priority. As Dr. Orlin, you just noted, the cost is very likely below the actual cost it will take to build this. But from the administration's perspective, over the last number of years, there has been considerable progress made on the redevelopment of that site and the partnerships that have been forged, not only between the county executive and educational academic institutions, but we had Governor Moore there just a few months ago, and there is state funding to support more redevelopment. And so from your perspective, how much does the county need to step out in front when there are other partners who we're figuring out the path forward
I think
with?
that's something that will be known when WMATA's master developer really gets engaged and we understand. I mean, my expectation is that this station needs to be integral to a signature building on that corner of the site. And there's a question about how much of that cost is going to be a shared cost between the building elements and the station. We don't know that today. There's a rough estimate that's been developed for the cost of the station to support a building, but it doesn't deal with the sharing of those structural elements and the cost between a building and the station or the specific design. So as Dr. Orland said, it's probably a year to 18 months before that sort of metric is known and how much can be borne as part of the development itself and how much needs to be subsidized for the county. And again, WMATA is the landowner and will be benefiting from the revenue from any development on that site. So there may be a component of this that's also funded by WMATA to generate the returns on their real estate asset.
Sure. Thank you for that. I'll just state that I support staff recommendation. I think it's important to show commitment to this area, but recognizing the cost increases that are likely to happen and the unique framework of that development project, I hope there are true negotiations and cost sharing across the board, but I think maintaining our commitment for everybody to see is good.
I concur.
There you go.
I was going to say
I was
something
waiting
else.
for something more. Okay.
It was going to be something more, but
The last note again is that the BRT amendments received from the executive and the associated amendment for the Veersmill Road, the Randolph Bicycle Pedestrian Priority Area project, as well as some other projects that are new from the executive because of the state aid we received. They'll all be reviewed on May 1st by the committee. Okay, with that, I'll go to item number 6, which is the parking lot district operating and CIP, budget and CIP for FY24. There you see the three different funds, one for each parking district. Bethesda, the increase is 3.7%. For Silver Spring, it's 4.2%, and Wheaton is 3.1%. In the operating budget, the interesting development here is that for the first time in a very long time, the three districts are actually in very good financial shape. The way we've typically measured this financial feasibility of the parking districts is looking at the end-of-year reserve and comparing it to the operating budget, projected operating budget for the next year. And the goal is to try to be at or about 25%, that ratio. And in the past few years, for several of these districts, some of these districts, we've been in single digits. It's been really pretty bad. And so we've seen some transfers happening between districts that are in better shape to ones that are in worse shape, just try to keep them afloat. But this year the forecast, as you can see in that table towards the bottom of page 2, is that we're either at or close to 25% or well in excess of 25% for all three districts over the next 5 years. Now, the first issue, sort of a follow-up from Monday, which is the Wayne Avenue garage fence. And the executive had recommended $300,000 to erect that fence for the reasons we talked about on Monday, but be funded out of the general fund. And I had made the argument that it should be paid for really out of the Silver Spring Parking District because it's really it's a liability issue for the parking district, and they're responsible for what goes on in that building, whether it's the customer or not. And so I'm pointing out at the bottom of page 2, you see Silver Spring's percentages of of the end-of-year reserve to next year's operating budget declines a little bit if we move $300,000 out of FY24, it goes from 26% down to 23%. And of course, it does cascade into the later years. 29% goes to 27% in 25, 27% down to 25% in 26, 30% down to 28% in 27, 30% down to 28% in 28. But all those figures are, given particularly the history of the PLDs, it's just fine. Okay, they're in decent shape. So I think the parking district can afford this $300,000 expense. So I continue to make that recommendation, and that would reduce the general fund contribution by $300,000, which will go towards savings to try to reduce the property tax increase.
So in a time when people have concerns about our downtown areas, why are the parking lot districts doing so well?
It's a bit misleading. The financial projections are healthy, but they represent very significant deferrals of capital projects such that that balance can be maintained. And there are either hour or rate increases embedded in the assumptions that underpin this. So if the capital projects and maintenance activities were occurring when they needed to, the drawdown of those balances would be much faster. And that's the point with the fence. If we were to spend another $300,000 out of the Silver Spring PLD budget, it would be unlikely that that fence would be the top priority for that expenditure, given condition of elevators and other things that have similar safety impacts if those systems fail, or loss of facility use if those systems fail. So that's what's going on here. Again, Dr. Orland's point is accurate. You could make the expenditure here, and given the way that the capital expenditures have been proposed, it doesn't have a seriously detrimental impact. But if we were to take that $300,000 and given our needs, that would not be where we would spend the next $300,000.
Can I suggest that maybe, for Mr. Conklin's point, we sort of jump ahead to the end of the packet on page 4, because that's where the facility renovations are, and we can talk about what those are and see if you're comfortable with those. And if you are, then the $300,000 really isn't an issue. Or if you're not comfortable, then it would be an issue.
You mean jump to the CIP?
Yeah, so if you go to page 4 of the packet, the CIP part of it, you'll see that the executive has recommended changes to both the Bethesda and the Silver Spring facility renovations project, and of course this issue is Silver Spring, so let's look at that. What you'll see is in that string of numbers, the approved, these are all numbers are in thousands of dollars, of course. So in FY23, there's FY23 is not, well, that's past. FY24, there's $4.87 million program. The proposed amendment would reduce that by almost half to about $2.5 million. And then it would actually, the proposed amendment would actually increase it a little bit more in 25, it goes down a bit in 26, et cetera. What's happening in Silver Spring, as the text shows, is the elevator modernization garage 55 would be deferred by 2 years, from FY24 to 26. But there is a modernization of the adjacent garage 5 elevator modernization, which would remain on schedule. And there are a few other changes as well, but that's, and when we get more detail as to what those are, we can. Maybe Joe's can talk about it.
Good morning, Joe Stamana with DOT. So to really understand this, we need to probably step back a few years to when the pandemic really hit. And if you look at Silver Spring PLD, our typical investment in level of effort CIP has been about $2.7 million each year. And since the pandemic hit to now, we've reduced that by 60% already. So that's already a big cut in what we've done in the PLDs since the pandemic hit, since FY20. Moving forward, if you look at the entire CIP cycle that's in right now, we've reduced that by an additional 15%. And the intent and it was intentional, because we wanted to maintain that fiscal balance for any uncertainty that may happen in the future, to give us a little bit more flexibility as we move through the recovery that's happening. And it's slow and gradual, and there are a lot of uncertainties. So that's really where a lot of the CIP expenditures are, and it's in the level of effort. So yes, there's some deferral in the elevator projects, but it's the typical maintenance that we're deferring more than everything else.
And what is typical maintenance? Can you explain that a little
So
bit?
things that happen, elevators break down, we have to do repairs, cleaning, painting, striping, pedestrian safety efforts, things that happen within the lighting repairs, plumbing. There's a whole host of things that we typically do to maintain clean and safe facilities.
But this work is it's not the day-to-day maintenance, it's the more infrastructure maintenance kind of stuff, right?
Correct, yes. So, for example, painting, that's not something that we do as a typical maintenance, but we haven't painted our facilities since FY19. We're now in FY23. That needs to be done. Striping, pedestrian paths, they're not clearly marked. Spaces aren't clearly marked. We have safety areas when people make turnarounds. Those things need to be upkept. So a lot of those things are what we haven't done, and we need to start getting back into.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. So I'm trying to understand I understand that it hasn't been done, and what is and isn't budgeted to be done. Because I think part of, I'll just speak for Silver Spring, people coming back and is being comfortable parking in our garages. And there are concerns now, right? And the county exec has talked about, and I don't know if it would be in this budget, but cameras and the blue light phones. And I don't know if that would come out of here or another budget, but I hadn't seen that discussed. And so I think, and so that's one bucket of things. The other is what you talked about the painting and other things, because the appearance makes people, whether or not they feel safe there or that's someplace they want to go and park their cars, and then visit the downtown area. So, so I think I'm trying to get my head around, what is budgeted, what isn't, and what are we able to do moving forward.
So on the camera and the security front, so we have certain portions of that in the operating budget. So we do have a contracted security service that, roves around and goes to all of our facilities. They're not stationary. They move between facilities. And that's kind of one approach. Then we also have cameras that are there at not all over the facility, of course, but at certain points we do have cameras, some entrances, exits, at the payment machines and things like that.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but I will. I'm sorry. On the cameras, the county executive has talked about and promised cameras in the stairwells. Is that in your operating budget?
We have not had that in our operating budget. That would be an additional capital expenditure.
Thank you. So I'm thinking, can we strike a better balance? I mean, it's great to have the reserves and great to have healthy reserves, but it sounds like we're not doing. This could be a penny wise, pound foolish example of not doing the repairs, specifically the safety repairs, the elevator and those kinds of things. So, do we have your priority list and how it would impact the reserve balances?
Yes, we do. So we conducted a assessment of all the elevators, for example, in 2018 and 2019, and that led to a plan of what needs to be fixed and over time. But then we hit the pandemic and a lot of that got deferred. So now we're just trying to put that back into the plan and move forward. We are addressing emergencies as they happen so that we're not having unsafe facilities, but it's the unknown. They're already due for repair. It could happen at any time. So if it happens, we have to address it as an emergency versus a proactive approach where we would do the holistic repair.
Okay.
So it's complicated in three ways. One is, as Joe's mentioned, making sure that the facilities stay operational, and if you have to repair something in an unplanned way, it's probably more expensive than if it were planned. But that's being balanced against the revenue and utilization uncertainty that we've been working through since 2020. And the third element of that is clearly changing the pricing in hours has an impact on the business district's ability to recover its own base. So while we might prefer a much more robust capital expenditure, what's been proposed by the executive here is trying to balance out those three factors, not overpromising what we can do, not placing too much of a burden on the customer who's deciding at this point to come back to these places. And the fund balances, if we hadn't had fund balances as we went into 2020, we would have had a real big problem. We already had a big problem, particularly in Bethesda, but it would have been kind of catastrophic. And it also allows I don't want to use the word slush fund, but a reserve for the unplanned repair, so that it's not going to drop the fund below a zero if something has to happen that wasn't budgeted for. So I think there's a decent balance here. The only question is, do we want to stress this further by adding what had been recommended as a general fund expenditure onto the already tenuously balanced PLD budget?
Can I make a suggestion? And we can't do this at the table. It's a little more complicated, but I was just checking with Greg and for OMB that I guess the reduction in FY24 in the general maintenance part of it was about 1.1 million. If we can come back to well, I still recommend cutting the $300,000 out of the general fund and using it from the parking district, but looking at the idea of maybe reducing the reserve amount below what it would otherwise be, maybe until 20% or even a little lower. Again, some years we're in single digits and we seem to survive, okay? The 25% is a goal. Maybe there's some of the money that the committee could recommend adding to the Silver Spring PLD budget to be able to restore at least some of the $1.1 million that the executive recommended cutting by going with a smaller reserve. But I don't want to toss out a number like right now. I think I want to sit down, work with DOT and OMB on this a little bit more, and come back to you on the May 1st with that.
Yeah. I would be comfortable with a lower percentage balance if it means that we're being proactive in particularly our safety issues.
So
I agree with that.
So I'm recommending putting a pin in the Silver Spring facilities renovations PDF. I mean, we'll come back to the others later, but still, I'm still recommending the 300,000 come out of the general.
And for conversation's sake, I'm inclined to support that as well, and appreciate the framing that my colleagues shared about getting the work done and being, getting the work done. That's it. Okay.
So that's one. The other two.
The other two, yeah.
Two. Stuart, is it?
Rephrase your question.
The recommendation is that the $300,000 be paid for out of the Silver Spring PLD for the fence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the next issue I'm raising actually interrelates with the urban district for particularly Ms. Stewart and Ms. Malcolm. There is a close relationship between those two budgets. The urban districts are paid for mostly by the urban district tax, but also by transfers from the parking lot, their respective parking lot districts. And their law actually says that between those two sources of revenue, one cannot provide more than 90% of the total of the two. And so every year when the executive is putting together the budget, he's trying to figure out what the needs are in the urban district and what the needs are in the parking district, and tries to strike a balance as to how much that transfer be. In Wheaton, as I pointed out, back on page 2, you'll see they're very healthy. This is very, very surprising looking at the past of Wheaton, which has actually been cash poor both for the urban district and the parking district. They seem to be doing very well now, particularly with the new garage under the county buildings doing well. And so it's a very high, 80% is the figure right now for FY24. So the thought was, I'll have to shift to the urban district. The urban, and this is really a discussion that those of you on Econ Committee are going to have tomorrow. The urban districts also get some amount of money from the general fund in recognition of the fact that the urban districts do some work that if they didn't exist, the general fund would have to do, particularly street maintenance. And so those are called baseline transfers. So there's a money that goes to Wheaton, Silver Spring, and Bethesda for that. And Ms. Michelson will be talking about that tomorrow. However, Wheaton Urban District has gotten a much, much bigger what's called non-baseline subsidy. It's basically just a straight general fund subsidy because there hasn't been much money that's been able to be transferred from the Wheaton Parking District to the Wheaton Urban District. And the Wheaton Urban District tax itself doesn't generate that much revenue. So the non-baseline transfer, which is from the general fund, is about $2.9 million in the executive's budget. So the thought was, perhaps now that the Wheaton PLD is doing much better, perhaps some of that money could be, that's in reserve, could be used instead for a somewhat larger PLD transfer from the Wheaton PLD to the urban district to be able to reduce that general fund non-baseline transfer. It's kind of like a knee bone's connected to the thigh bone kind of thing. So I'm recommending that the PLD transfer be $200,000 more, which would then reduce the non-baseline transfer from about 2.9 million to 2.7. It's still a huge transfer, but it does save $200,000 out of the general fund operating budget, which again is a contribution to the reduction in the tax. And it doesn't violate the 90% rule. You can see the table in the middle of page 3. Currently, the Wheaton PLD is transferring 52%, 6% of the total between the PLD and the urban district, and the $200,000 increase would increase the percentage to about 65%, still within the 90%. And then if you look at the ratios, of operating end of year subsidy to next year's operating expense, you see it drops in FY24 from 80% to 68%, and you see the numbers spreading out the other years. By FY28, it does drop to 30%, but it's still better than 25%. So in other words, the Wheaton PLD can afford this. And unlike Silver Spring, there aren't any recommendations from the executive to reduce any of the facility renovations in Wheaton, so there's not an issue there. So that's my recommendation for that.
I appreciate the recommendation. I support it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right. Otherwise, I didn't really talk about anything else, but otherwise the parking lot district budget, what they're programming to spend, I'm recommending approval of. I guess should have mentioned that. Point out the fact that, of course, the obvious, which is the parking district's an enterprise fund, it doesn't interact with the rest of the budget, so it doesn't. If you decided to reduce the operating expense or operating budget of the PLD, which I do not recommend, it would just fall to the reserve, which we can see the reserves are doing fine. And then finally, the amendments to the CIP. We talked about Silver Spring. We're going to putting a pin on that. But at Bethesda, there is a reduction also in FY24, but it sort of goes up and down. Some years it's down, some years it's up. And in the text, I highlighted what's going on a little bit in Bethesda. The air quality improvements and part of the waterproofing in Garage 49, which is the Metropolitan Building in Bethesda, would be deferred by 1 year. Some control system room work in several garages would be delayed, actually by 3 years. And LED lighting projects would be delayed actually by 4 years in those areas. But as you can see, the funding sort of goes up and down within the period. And actually, the 6-year total is actually a bit higher than what's in the approved CIP. So I'm recommending approval of the executive's recommendation for the Bethesda facility renovations project. And again, we come back to Silver Spring on May 1st.
Mm-hmm. Great. I had a question about Bethesda, particularly Garage 49 and the elevators. So I've been told there have been a couple that have been out for a while, and where are fixing those in the plan?
Yes. We've had this issue for some time now, and it really relates to the plaza that's on that top level that's maintained by HOC, and that was the source of the water that, unfortunately that elevator bank is at the lowest point of that plaza, so all the water flows in there and it goes into that elevator shaft and it shorts out the equipment. That happened a couple of times and we fixed it, and it's an expensive fix. So we don't want that to happen over and over again. We need to fix that root problem, which is what HOC is doing right now. They should be done within a year with their repairs, and we are coordinating with them so that as soon as they're done, we will have our elevators ready to come back online.
Great, thanks for answering that question. And I guess, I know we're coming back to the Silver Spring, but I'm also noticing the drop in FY '24 for Bethesda. And then I know we pick it up in later years. I'm just curious why yeah.
Again, it's the change in revenue projections. We're just making sure that we defer things so that we can meet the revenues that are coming in each year.
I think I'd go back to Councilmember Balcom's point before, which is, I understand that and I appreciate that, but sometimes deferring things will have this cascading effect that people will just stop using the garages, or, delaying the maintenance sometimes creates bigger problems, so.
To me, the premise is the same. If we can look at, if we're looking at Silver Spring to see what the balance is between expenditure and the balance, we should do the same for the Bethesda.
We can do that if that's, if the committee wants to like. All right, we'll look at both.
Great, thank you.
With that, that's the parking district budget. And the last item on the agenda is the resolution for transportation fees, charges, and fares. The execs, basically all his recommended changes are in the parking districts. There aren't really any changes in the transit schedule. There's some corrections that would have been made here. And in my packet, I have to point out an error I made. In the cover memo, I said one of the recommended reduction or changes from the executive is to reduce the Metro Rail to ride-on bus transfer from $1 to 50 cents. Basically, all of this is really a correction. The resolution that came over was incorrect, and we changed it. The executive is not recommending a change there. It basically has been 50 cents and would stay 50 cents. So all the changes are in parking. The main one is that in Bethesda, we have been charging on-street parking on Saturdays, but not in lots and garages, and this would extend it to lots and garages in Bethesda. In Silver Spring, we've not been charging at all on Saturdays, and this would extend it to on-street lots and garages in Silver Spring. The other changes are in Bethesda and Silver Spring, we have what's called an AM/PM permit, which allows residents of those districts to park in a county garage with a $20 pass per month overnight, and as long as they take their car out the next morning. I don't remember what the hours are exactly, but Joe's can fill you in on that if you want. This would extend that same permit to Wheaton, so that a resident in Wheaton could, if they decide to, could park in a Garage 45 or one of the other garages there overnight, again, for a $20 pass. That pass doesn't exist now. And the other new thing in all three districts is a weekend permit, which would, for $70 a month, which would allow someone to park at a long-term meter between the hours of 7 to 9 in the morning and 5 to 10 p.m. In the evening from Monday through Saturday, or Monday through Friday, and then all day Saturday. So they could park all day Saturday for free if they pay the $70 a month permit. That's a totally new thing. We had the public hearing on the fees on Tuesday, had no speakers, remarkably. But this is a first. But nevertheless, no speakers, so I'm recommending approval of what the exec's recommending.
So the very first time I came to the county council and testified was in this room. I sat there and testified against the proposal back in 2006 or 7 to institute evening and weekend fees for downtown Silver Spring, recognizing that there were thousands of new residents, including myself, who were moving into that area, and there was a lot of change, and we didn't need that. And Council President at the time, Marilyn Praisner, told me to be quick with my testimony because she knew what they were going to do and they were going to reverse course, right? Because I think they had implemented the change. And so the fact that no one has testified, they very well might moving forward.
Yes.
And so I understand that this is not a new proposal. We keep revisiting this. But since we just talked about the solvency of the parking lot districts, do those figures factor these changes into account?
Yes.
Okay. So built into the presentation we just had was the assumption that this would be adopted.
Although there was no testimony at the public hearing, Mr. Tomana has done outreach with the business communities in the parking lot districts, so these are not a surprise to the urban districts and business district representatives there.
Well, and I would add one more extremely relevant to the conversation, to the story I just shared. Whether it is Wheaton and Silver Spring more so than Bethesda because they don't currently have these policies, the business community is important, but the residential community and the number of high rises that are down there, this is a change, and people will not be used to it. I appreciate the creativity in the new flexible the new flexible permits. I know that there are already morning and evening permits that are available. So I still need to wrap my head around this, but let me put a pause on the parking lot fees for 1 sec and just go back to transportation fees in general and ask the question that I've asked every year for the last number of years. Now that we have buses down to $1, what would it cost to make our buses free?
According to the budget, it's $8.5 million is how much money we're expecting to get in fare revenue from Ride-On.
Okay.
And if it were extended to Metrobus as well, it's probably about the same amount for that, because the ridership of Metrobus is probably about a third of the county ridership, maybe a little bit more. So it's probably almost twice as many Ride-On riders as Metrobus, but remember they're paying $2 a ride rather than just $1. So to buy down that to free, treat everybody the same, it'd probably be about 17, maybe 18 million.
Okay, so $8.5 million to make our ride-on buses free, and another $8.5 million approximately to make the Metro buses free as well. As much as I would like to move forward a proposal, recognizing that it is important for transit equity, I know that this budget does not allow for an additional $8.5 million to be added to it, as we are all working to try and work within the constraints that we currently have. So I'm not going to move anything forward, but I think it's important for the context of this conversation.
Just to that point, I mean, there is a desire to have a consistent fare policy between Metrobus and Ride-On, and the new equity-based fare plan that is in the WMATA budget is an extremely important step towards that, because now a rider that qualifies for that program will be paying the same regardless of which bus system they're using. We could not do it now. It needs extensive public involvement, but this does allow us to consider restoring parity in the transit system fares in future years.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah.
PLDs? No, you're good.
Here, I'm good.
It's all part of the same,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so how much revenue are you anticipating for Saturday parking?
So in both the Silver Spring and the Bethesda PLDs, it's about 1.2 million additional revenues that will come in spread out over 2 years, really, because that first FY24 year, we wouldn't be able to implement the rate increase all over, so we wouldn't realize that revenue in that first year. But over 2 years, it's about 1.2 million.
Okay, and how are you estimating the number of people parking in the garages?
So we do have counts that we do. We do occupancy counts from time to time.
On Saturdays?
Sometimes on Saturdays. We have some facilities that do have all 24/7 counters, and that does give us some good information. And that's some of the reasoning that the travel patterns have changed. We used to have a peak from 11 to 4 That's completely gone now. We have a peak from 11 to 2 and then a peak from 4 to 10, and heavier Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's changed significantly, and that's the behavior we need to adapt to.
The other element of the proposal was trying to be more uniform among the three PLDs, because there's always been questions about how come Business District X has this plan, Business District Y has that plan, you're being unfair to me because somebody else doesn't have it. We're trying to reduce the degree of difference between them so that it's a more even treatment of the three PLDs.
Yes, I'm going to be supportive of this. But again, so just to go back to the conversation we had before, I'd like to revisit the cameras in stairwells, just because this has been a real concern in Silver Spring, and I will say the county executive has talked about it. So I just, for my residents, I'm just going to be really honest. If I vote for this today, for this change, and we're also being told that cameras for stairwells are not in this current budget, that is going to cause some great concern. So I need to revisit that piece of
I
it.
think that's principally a timing issue of when these budgets were prepared versus
Yep.
when the issue of cameras and stairwells really materialized.
Yeah.
I just want to add on to that, because regardless of how many businesses you talk to and about this increase, the residents are going to find out the first Saturday that they park, and they're going to be surprised. And with the issue of safety, if they are feeling they're paying more but not having increasing safety, so I think that's important. Thank you.
So to that point, I appreciate both comments. Can there be a week or 2 week grace period as the enforcement officers are walking around, rather than giving a ticket in the windshield, drop another piece of information informing them of these new changes?
Yes, absolutely. And that's typically how we roll out our rate increases, is we do gradually, facility by facility. We do signage first, we then provide a 2 to 4 week, depending on the type of facility, grace period where we give out some warnings, maybe let people know that, the fees are being charged, and then after that we go into the typical enforcement.
Okay. I think that's a good strategy moving forward. And then last question for me, Mr. Tamana, you had said that the parking peak hours are 11 to 1, so basically lunchtime and then dinner?
Yes.
When it used to be a workday, a full workday.
Correct. So the average duration of stay prior to the pandemic was about 7 hours. Now it's about 4 hours.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, so support from the council, from the committee for those recommendations. And with that, we are done with today's budget session. Thank you very much, DOT. Thank you, Dr. Olin.